Story 1.
I know what you all think of me. I'm the wedding planner who almost ruined a bride's big day. The incompetent, unprofessional mess who got fired a week before the wedding. I've seen the comments. I've heard the whispers. My business is probably finished, and honestly, maybe it should be. But I just want to explain my side. Not for forgiveness, just for a second of understanding. Before all this, I was sober. I had been for years. I had built a business from nothing, one that I was proud of. Then the pandemic hit. It was like watching my entire life's work get washed away in slow motion. Every cancellation call felt like a punch to the gut. The savings drained, the phone stopped ringing, and the silence in my apartment got louder and louder. That old familiar screaming in my head started up again. A tiny voice that said times, "You're not good enough, you're going to fail, you're a fraud." Asterisks. I started small. A pill to help me sleep. Just one. Then another to stop my hands from shaking in the morning. I told myself it was temporary. I was just managing the stress until things got back to normal. When this bride, Sarah, hired me, it felt like a lifeline. It was my first big wedding since the world fell apart. I needed it. Not just the money, but the feeling of being useful again. The feeling that I could still do this, that I hadn't completely lost my touch. We had the site meeting in June. Sarah was sweet, but you could tell her mind was a million miles away. Her sister had just gotten a terrible diagnosis, and she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Then the florist walked in. Let's call her Anna. Anna wasn't just a florist. She was a local legend, and she knew it. She walked into that venue like she owned it, talking down to the staff and making little comments about how she was squeezing us into her impossibly busy schedule. Every word out of her mouth made me feel smaller. She talked about her flowers like they were precious artifacts, about how her costs were non-negotiable, about how her art was perishable. I felt like I was back in high school, facing down the popular girl who had decided I wasn't cool enough. The old shame started creeping up my spine. When her proposal came in, it was insane. The price was astronomical, and there was zero room for changes. I saw Sarah's face fall. With her sister's medical bills, this was a huge stretch. I put my hand on her arm and said the words I would come to regret. Don't worry. We'll figure it out. That's my job. But I wasn't figuring anything out. My days became a blurry mess of anxiety and pills. I wasn't sleeping right. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, convinced I'd forgotten something critical. Sarah was understandably completely consumed by her family crisis. She'd cancel meetings at the last minute or just text me, "I trust you." Just handle it. Pick something beautiful. It was a planner's dream and an addict's nightmare. Total control with no one checking my work. The perfect environment for me to fall apart in private. On September 1st, Sarah's fiancé Mark met me for coffee and handed me a stack of checks for the vendors. They were all there, clipped together in a neat little pile. Looking at them, I felt a huge wave of relief wash over me. I can still fix this, I thought. I can pay everyone, get everything locked in, and pull this off. It was a second chance. I put the checks into the main pocket of my leather client binder, the one I take with me everywhere. I got home and started addressing the envelopes. The caterer, the DJ, the photographer, the venue, and then I got to the florist. I reached into the binder pocket and my fingers found nothing. Panic hit me like a physical blow. A cold, sharp dread that stole the air from my lungs. I emptied the binder, shaking it out. Nothing. I tore my office apart. I went through every file, every drawer, every pile of paper. I searched my car, pulling up the floor mats, digging under the seats. I went through my house like a tornado. The check was just gone. How do you call a bride who is sitting by her sister's hospital bed and tell her you lost a check for thousands of dollars? How do you admit that kind of screw-up? And more than that, how could I possibly call times Anna times I? Could already hear the condescending tone in her voice. See the look of disgust on her face. She already thought I was a joke. This would just prove it. So I did the worst thing possible. I did nothing. I told myself it would turn up, that I must have put it somewhere safe and just forgotten. When days passed and it didn't, I created a new plan. I'd wait for my next client payment to come in and I'd just pay her myself. I'd write a check from my own business account and no one would ever have to know. I could still fix this. I just needed a little more time. Anna started emailing. At first they were polite. Hi, just following up on the contract and deposit. I ignored them. Then they got a little more pointed. Hi, I need the deposit by the end of this week to hold your date. I let that one sit in my inbox, a glowing red mark of my failure. I was playing a stupid, desperate game of chicken, praying for a miracle. Every morning I woke up with a knot of dread in my stomach, and every night I took something to knock myself out so I wouldn't have to think about it. I was living on a knife's edge, and I knew it couldn't last. The wedding was getting closer and closer. My whole body was buzzing with a constant low-level panic. Then, exactly 1 week before the wedding, my phone lit up. It was a text from Sarah. My heart stopped. I knew before I even read it that it was over. Her message was simple. Hey, just spoke to Anna to confirm the flower delivery times. She said she was never booked. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we all hop on a quick Zoom call to sort it out? That text message sat on my screen, a glowing little bomb. My first thought was a stupid, childish one, times I can just not answer asterisk. I could throw my phone in the river and disappear. But I'm an adult. I'm a business owner. So I took a pill to steady my hands and typed back, of course, send me a link. The half hour before the call was the longest of my life. I put on a nice blouse, did my makeup, and tried to look like the capable professional I was pretending to be. I rehearsed my lines. It was a simple miscommunication. A dropped ball. An oversight in her office. I could spin this. I had to spin this. When I logged into the Zoom, their faces popped up 2 little boxes of judgment. Sarah looked tired and worried, her brow furrowed. Anna looked perfect. She had on bright red lipstick and her hair was immaculate. She held a big mug of coffee in both hands and smiled a tight, sharp little smile. She was ready for war. I started first, trying to control the narrative. Sarah, Anna, thanks for hopping on. I'm so sorry for the confusion. It looks like there was an administrative oversight on our end, Anna. I have the payment right here ready to go. We just need to get the contract finalized. I tried to sound breezy and in control, like this was a boring piece of paperwork we just had to get through. Anna just stared at me. She took a slow sip of her coffee. Then she let out a small, sharp laugh. It wasn't a friendly sound. An oversight, is that what we're calling it? My blood ran cold. I've been emailing you for almost 2 months, she said, her voice dangerously calm. My office manager has called you. You don't book a florist of my caliber with a week to go and call it an oversight. That's not how this works. I saw Sarah's eyes dart between us. I had to try again. I understand your frustration, Anna, but my focus has been entirely on Sarah and her family situation. Things have been chaotic. I was simply waiting for the final go-ahead. That's when Anna put her mug down. She leaned into the camera and her smile was gone. You know, I asked around about you after our meeting in June. The name sounded familiar. And then I remembered the wedding at the Grand Hotel a few years back. The bride with cancer. I stopped breathing. It felt like she'd punched me through the screen. That was my lowest point before I got sober the first time. A mistake that has haunted my nightmares for years. You forgot to book the transportation for her entire family, Anna said, her eyes locked on mine. She wasn't even looking at Sarah anymore. This was for me. They were all flying in to see her get married before she started chemo, and they were stranded at the airport. All because you were, what was the word they used, disorganized. Unresponsive. I couldn't speak. My throat was closed tight. All I could see was Sarah's face in the other box, her expression slowly crumbling as she understood. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. So don't you dare sit there in your pretty blouse and tell me this was an oversight. Anna spat. You are incompetent. And I will personally make sure that every vendor, every venue, and every future bride in this city knows my name and knows to never, ever work with yours. That was it. The kill shot. I looked at Sarah. Tears were silently rolling down her cheeks. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through everything. You're fired, she said to me. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and then turned to Anna. Can you help me, please? I'll pay whatever you want. I didn't wait to hear Anna's triumphant reply. I just moved my mouse and clicked Leave meeting. The screen went blank, showing only my own reflection. A pale, sweaty woman with dead eyes. I sat there for I don't know how long. An hour. 2. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I finally stood up, feeling numb, and started to clear my desk. I picked up my leather binder, the source of all this misery. I was going to throw it in the trash, but as I held it, my thumb pressed against the side and felt a strange lump. A thickness in the leather that shouldn't have been there. My heart started pounding again, but for a different reason. I fumbled with the lining, prying it away from the leather, and there it was. The check. It had slipped through a tiny tear in the fabric of the inner pocket and was lodged deep inside the cover itself. I just stared at it. All this time, all this lying, all this panic, all this destruction, and it was right here. I started to laugh, a horrible choked sound. It was the cruelest joke in the world. I took a picture of it with my phone and sent it to Sarah. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. Asterisk. I am so sorry. I found the check. I was just so embarrassed that I lost it and I didn't know how to tell you. I know it's no excuse. Asterisk. It It was the truth. But it was the smallest, most pathetic piece of the truth. How could I explain the rest? That the shame was so huge because it was tied to a bigger, uglier secret, that I was so terrified of being seen as a failure that I guaranteed my own failure, that I wasn't just hiding a lost check, I was hiding a lost life. She never texted back. I know what they say about me now. Anna made good on her promise. The story is everywhere in the local wedding community. I'm the planner who lied, who ghosted, who almost ruined a wedding for a poor bride who was already going through hell. They're right. I did all of those things. I am a terrible wedding planner. But I'm also a person who was dangling by a thread, and then the thread snapped. I fell, and I'm still falling. And I don't know if I'll ever get back up.
Story 2.
I know what he told you. I'm sure he painted a picture of a cold, cheating wife who planned to steal his kids and run off with some guy overseas. He's good at telling stories. He's been telling them our whole marriage, shaping our lives into the story he wanted to live. I was just a character in it. For 15 years, my name was basically Navy wife and mom. And I'm not saying I didn't love my kids, they're my entire world, but I was never just times me, asterisk. It all started with him joining the Navy. It was his grand gesture, you see. He did it for us so he could support the family, and I wouldn't have to worry. What it really meant was that his career would always come first. We moved when the Navy said move. Our lives were dictated by his deployment schedule. My job was to keep the house running and the kids happy, a perfect little support system for his big, important career. He was proud of putting me through school while he was in. But it was never about what I wanted. It was about what was practical. A certificate here, an associate's degree there. Things I could do online or at night, things that would never turn into a real career that might interfere with his. He was curating my life, building the perfect wife he had in mind. I was his project. When he was getting ready to retire, the dynamic shifted. Suddenly it was my turn. He pushed me to get a real job to contribute. He was the one who found the officer program in the Navy Reserves. He thought it was perfect. I'd have a respectable career, good benefits, and it was a world he understood. It was still under his influence in a way. But then a funny thing happened. I was good at it. Really good. For the first time in my adult life, I had an identity that wasn't tied to him. I wasn't just someone's wife or someone's mom. I was an officer. People listened to me because of my skills, not because of who my husband was. That feeling, it was like breathing for the first time after being underwater for a decade. The validation was intoxicating. And when the opportunity came up for a multi-year post overseas, I knew I had to take it. It was my chance to finally be a whole person. Of course, he wasn't thrilled. We had 3 kids. It was a huge change. We talked about it for weeks. He finally agreed, but there was a catch. The open relationship. It sounds so modern and progressive, doesn't it? But it wasn't. It was the most cynical thing he'd ever said to me. He sat me down and said, "I figure you'll do it anyway, so we might as well just be open about it." It wasn't permission. It was an accusation. It was him telling me he already expected me to fail to betray him. He wasn't giving me freedom. He was preemptively managing my screw-up. He'd already decided what kind of woman I was. Overseas, everything changed. I wasn't living in my husband's shadow. I was respected for my work, and that's where I met him. He was a superior officer, and at first it was purely professional. But he saw times me, asterisk. Not the wife, not the mother, just me. He saw my ambition, and he didn't think it was a threat. He thought it was impressive. We'd talk for hours about work, about our goals, about life. It was a relationship between peers, something I'd never truly had. It felt like a lifeline in the middle of an ocean of loneliness. It grew into something more, and for the first time I felt like I was in a partnership, not a project. My marriage was falling apart. I knew it. Every call home was a reminder of the life I was suffocating in. The guilt was eating me alive, but so was the misery. I confided in a friend back home, someone I thought I could trust. I was a mess. I'd be on the phone with her, crying, just trying to figure out what to do. You know how you talk when you feel completely trapped. You throw out desperate hypotheticals. What if I just didn't go back? What if I could file for divorce from here? What if I could just have the kids with me, have my career, and be free from his control? It wasn't a plan. It was a fantasy. It was me at my lowest point, dreaming of a way out, any way out. It was a tearful, desperate brainstorming session with a friend. I never ever imagined she would take those words, strip them of all their pain and desperation, and present them to my husband as a cold, calculated plot. She betrayed me. She handed him a weapon, and he was more than happy to use it. The phone call was terrifying. He didn't sound heartbroken. He sounded furious. It was the rage of a man who had discovered his prized possession was no longer in its box. He wasn't crying because he missed me. He was screaming because he had lost control. His demands were immediate and absolute. I had to end it with my colleague, effective immediately. I had to block him on everything. I had to erase every trace of the one person who had made me feel seen. There was no discussion. It was an order. I was a subordinate who had stepped out of line, and he was putting me back in my place. Scared out of my mind, I agreed to everything. I ended it. But blocking a superior officer on professional networking sites isn't like blocking an ex on Facebook. It's a statement. It's awkward and raises questions I couldn't afford to answer. I was trying to figure out how to navigate it, how to cut ties personally without committing career suicide. I just needed a day or two to handle it delicately. But he didn't give me a day. He was watching. He checked my social media and saw he was still listed as a connection. He didn't see my fear or my professional dilemma. He only saw defiance. My phone rang again. It was him. And the tone in his voice this time, it was different. The rage was gone, replaced by something much, much colder. He had his proof. He had the justification he needed to burn my entire world to the ground. He told me he had called our daughter into the room. He said he was going to tell her everything. I begged him not to. She was just a kid. But he did it anyway. Later, I heard the full story. He apparently collapsed onto the floor, sobbing, clutching her, and telling her that Mommy had a new boyfriend and was planning to leave them all forever. He put on the performance of a lifetime, a dramatic, heartbreaking show designed for one purpose: to poison my children against me. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He wasn't just trying to hurt me. He was salting the earth, making sure nothing good could ever grow between me and my kids again. Then he laid out his final threat. It was no longer just about me. He told me he had my colleague's full name, his wife's name, and his command's contact information. He said if I didn't sign a legal document he was having drawn up, he would go nuclear. He would report our relationship to his command, which would end his career instantly. He would call his wife and tell her everything. He would destroy this man's entire life, his marriage, his family, his 2 decades of service, all to punish me. It was a brutal display of power. He was showing me that his reach was long, and he wasn't afraid to ruin other people to get what he wanted. He was forcing me back into the box I had tried so hard to climb out of. I was trapped. Completely and utterly trapped. He held everything hostage. My career, which was just starting. My colleague's life, which I never wanted to damage. And most importantly, my children's love, which he was actively turning into hate. What was I supposed to do? Fight him from thousands of miles away while he was in the house with them, whispering his version of the story into their ears every night? A few days later, a document arrived by email. It was a post-nuptial agreement. It was simple and brutal. It stipulated that in the event of a divorce, he would get full custody of the children. He would get the house. He would get everything. My signature on that paper was the price of his silence. The price to save my colleague's career. The price to stop my husband's campaign of poison against me with my own kids. I signed it. I signed it under the most extreme duress I have ever known. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was in a panic, just trying to make the threats stop. In my terrified mind, signing it was like hitting the pause button on a disaster. I thought it would de-escalate the situation. I thought it would calm him down, show him I was behaving. I thought it would buy me time. Time to finish my tour, to come home to talk to him like a rational human being, and work out a real fair plan for our family. I truly believe that no court would ever enforce a document signed under such obvious coercion. I never, not for a second, thought he would actually use it. I thought it was just his ultimate power move, a trophy of his victory over me. I was so wrong. I came home a year later, ready to try and salvage what was left of my family. I suggested counseling. I tried to talk about co-parenting. I wanted to find a way forward where we could both be in our children's lives. He just smiled. He waited until I was settled back in, and then he filed for divorce, and with it he filed the agreement I had signed. That piece of paper, my signature, scrawled on it in a moment of pure terror, became an unbreakable weapon. He used it to take my children. He told the court I had abandoned them, that I had signed them over willingly so I could run off and be with my lover. He used my friend's betrayal and my own desperate words as proof of a long-concocted plan. He twisted my desperation into malice. He painted my attempt to find myself as a plot to destroy him. I know I made mistakes. I hurt him, and I hurt my family, and I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. I was clumsy and I was selfish. But my story isn't about a villain who wanted to steal her kids. It's about a woman who was suffocating and tried to find a window to get some air. I was just fantasizing about what it might feel like to breathe. And he used that fantasy to lock me in a cage and take away the only thing that ever mattered to me. He didn't just win. He burned my whole world down to make sure I knew I had lost.
Story 3.
All right, I know what you've probably heard. You've heard her side of the story, and I'm sure I sound like the biggest monster on the planet. The guy who proposed with a cheap ring just to blow up his own life. And yeah, I did that. But you're only getting the highlight reel of my supposed villainy. You don't know what it was like for the last year living in a relationship that felt more like a business arrangement where I was the only one paying the bills. When I met Anna, it was great. It was easy. We laughed a lot, we had fun, things were simple. I was doing well at my job, and I liked treating her to nice things. It felt good to see her happy. I bought her a beautiful pair of diamond earrings for our first anniversary, not because I felt like I had to, but because I wanted to. I remember her crying, saying no one had ever done anything like that for her. That was the feeling I was always chasing after. But somewhere along the way, things changed. The want to slowly turned into a have to. Our weekends stopped being about what we wanted to do and started being about where we needed to be seen. Brunch at the new trendy spot, a weekend getaway to a boutique hotel, her friend recommended charity dinners where I had to wear a tux. It was a performance, and I was the lead actor playing the role of successful, doting boyfriend. Every gift started to feel less like a surprise and more like a prop for the next scene. The designer bag for her birthday, the Swiss watch for Christmas. They weren't for her, not really. They were for her friends to see, for her family to comment on. Her conversations started to change too. It was subtle at first. She'd talk about her friend Jessica's engagement ring, casually mentioning it was 3 carats. She'd point out a couple's destination wedding photos on Instagram, sighing about how romantic it must be. I started to feel like my own personality was fading away, replaced by my job title and my bank account. I wasn't just her boyfriend anymore. I was her provider, her ticket to a certain lifestyle. And she was my beautiful, socially acceptable +1. We looked perfect on paper, and everyone told us so. Her parents adored me. My friends thought she was amazing. Breaking that perfect picture seemed impossible. How do you tell everyone, sorry, this painting you all love is actually a prison? The pressure was getting to me. I was stressed at work, and coming home felt like clocking in for a second shift. That's when I started talking more to Mark, a guy in my department. Mark had been through a nasty divorce a few years back, and he was cynical as hell, but he listened. I'd tell him about Anna and the constant expectations, and he'd just nod. She's got you on the hook, man, he'd say. You're not a person to her, you're a portfolio. I tried to argue to defend her, but his words stuck in my head. He started pointing things out, little red flags I'd been trying to ignore. The way her eyes would linger on my watch. The way a bad day for me was only a problem if it meant we had to cancel expensive dinner plans. And then I met someone. It wasn't planned. She was a consultant on a project at work. With her, it was like a breath of fresh air. We'd grab coffee and just talk for an hour. No expectations, no performances. She asked me about my hobbies, not my bonus. It wasn't an affair yet, not physically, but in my head I had already left. I knew I couldn't marry Anna. But how could I possibly get out? I'd be the guy who broke the heart of the sweetest girl in the world for no reason. I'd be a social outcast. I felt completely, utterly trapped. One night, after a few beers, I laid it all out for Mark. The pressure, the other woman, the feeling of suffocation. I have to end it, I said, but I can't just dump her. It'll destroy my reputation. Mark swirled his beer and looked at me. If you think she's about the money, prove it, he said. Give her a way to show her true colors. Propose. But do it on your terms. Test the theory. The idea was disgusting. It was manipulative. And in that moment it felt like the most brilliant plan I had ever heard. It was a way out where I wouldn't be the bad guy. I'd be the victim. The next day I went online. I scrolled past all the jewelers I had bookmarked, all the ones Anna had casually pointed out. I typed cheap engagement rings into the search bar. I found a site with questionable reviews and found a little silver-colored stacker ring with a tiny chip of something that was probably glass. It was $150. It was perfect. Hitting buy made my stomach clench, but it also felt like I was buying my freedom. I planned the proposal for the following weekend at the Botanical Gardens, one of our first date spots. I put on the suit, I said all the right words, I got down on one knee. The whole thing felt like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. When I opened the little velvet box, I saw exactly what I was hoping for, and it still made me feel sick. Her smile froze for a split second. Her eyes, which should have been filled with tears of joy, were filled with confusion. They flickered from the pathetic little ring back to my face, as if searching for an answer or a punchline. "Yes," she whispered, her voice a little shaky. "Of course, yes." But the damage was done. I saw it. The next few days were the worst, most agonizing part of the whole thing. It was a slow-motion car crash. I watched her try to show the ring to her mom over FaceTime, her hand trembling slightly as she held it up to the camera. I saw her mom's face twist into a polite, pained smile. I heard her on the phone with her best friend, her voice low. "I just don't understand," was all I could catch. She started forgetting to wear it at home, saying it might get damaged when she was cooking or cleaning. Every excuse was another piece of evidence. She didn't confront me. She didn't yell or cry. She just let it sit there between us, a toxic little secret poisoning everything. She was stewing, letting the resentment build over a piece of metal. Mark was right. She was showing her true colors. She was failing the test spectacularly. Then 4 days after the proposal, she walked into the living room while I was watching TV. She had a serious look on her face, a look I knew all too well. It was her "we need to have a serious talk" face. My heart started pounding, but not with fear, with anticipation. She sat on the couch across from me, folded her hands in her lap, and took a deep breath. "Honey," she started, her voice calm and measured. "I'd like to talk about the ring." That was it. That was the line. The 4 days of silent tension, the pathetic smiles, the whispered phone calls, it all led to this. A wave of pure, absolute relief washed over me. The waiting was over. The game was up. I had my proof. I didn't let her finish her little rehearsed speech. I didn't want to hear her careful, gentle explanation about symbolism or what the ring times meant times to her. I already knew what it meant. It meant $150. "Talk about the ring," I said, standing up. I couldn't sit still. The energy in the room was electric. "You want to talk about the ring now? It's been 4 days, Anna. 4 days you've been walking around here with a long face, hiding it from your friends, barely able to look at me." Her calm expression faltered. "That's not." "Isn't it?" I started pacing. All the frustration, all the resentment from the past year, it was all bubbling up, and I was ready to let it pour out. "You didn't say anything when I put it on your finger. You didn't say anything when you saw your mom's disappointed face on FaceTime. You waited. You let it eat at you. You know why? Because you were weighing your options. You were wondering if a lifetime with me was worth starting with times on your finger." Tears welled up in her eyes. How can you say that? It was a shock. I just needed time to process. Process what? The price tag, I laughed, but it was a bitter, ugly sound. This was the script Mark and I had talked about, the lines I had rehearsed in my head. This was a test, Anna. A simple test, and you failed it. I wanted to see if you loved me, or if you loved what I can buy you. For 4 days you proved my point. You proved it was always about the money. A test? She whispered, her voice cracking. The perfect composure she always had was shattering right in front of me, and it was the most liberating thing I had ever seen. Yes, a test. I needed to know. I was yelling now. Do you have any idea what it feels like to be a walking wallet? To know that every nice dinner, every vacation, every gift is just another payment to keep the perfect girlfriend happy? I'm suffocating. That's when I dropped the bomb. It wasn't about guilt. It was about winning. It was about showing her how completely and totally she had lost me. And you know what? While you were waiting to talk about the ring, I was talking to someone else, I said, my voice dropping, becoming cold and sharp. I've been seeing someone. Someone who doesn't give a damn what kind of watch I'm wearing or how many carats are in a ring. Someone I can actually be myself with. That was the final blow. I saw it land. The color drained from her face. The tears that had been welling in her eyes now streamed down her cheeks. She looked at me as if I was a complete stranger. You're a gold digger, Anna, I spat the words out. They felt disgusting in my mouth, but they were my ticket to freedom. You cared more about a piece of jewelry than the man who gave it to you. You ruined this. You did. She just stared at me for a long moment, her mouth slightly open in shock. Then, without another word, she stood up, grabbed her purse from the counter, and walked straight out the front door. She didn't even slam it. She just left. I stood there in the silent apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. I expected to feel guilty or sad. I felt nothing but a huge, soaring sense of triumph. It was over. I had done it. I was free. And best of all, I was the one who had been wronged. I was the victim who had discovered his fiancée's true nature just in time. The first person I called was Mark. She's gone, I said. Did it work? He asked. Like a charm. She waited 4 days to complain about the ring. I told her everything. The test, the other woman. She walked right out. I could hear him smiling through the phone. Told you, man. You just dodged the biggest bullet of your life. Now, go buy that other girl a drink. You've earned it. Next came the hard part, managing the fallout. I sent a carefully worded text to our mutual friends and to her parents. Asterisk, Anna and I have broken up. I'm heartbroken. I discovered some things about her priorities that I couldn't live with. Please respect my privacy during this difficult time. Asterisk. To my own family and my closest friends, I told the whole story, my version of it. I told them about the pressure, about feeling like a bank account. I told them about the test. I know it sounds crazy, I'd say, but I had to know. And she proved me right. Her whole family was weird about it. It was all she could talk about with her friends. When she finally confronted me, it wasn't about us, it was about the ring. People were shocked, but they believed me. I was the good guy who had a lucky escape. The narrative was set. A week later, I took the other woman, Sarah, out to dinner. We went to a simple Italian place, not one of the trendy spots Anna would have picked. She didn't look at my watch once. She laughed at my stupid jokes. It was easy. It felt real. Looking across the table at her, I felt a twinge of something, but I pushed it down. It wasn't guilt. It was inconvenience. I was annoyed that Anna had forced me to do something so dramatic, so ugly. She had backed me into a corner with her materialism and her expectations. My actions weren't my fault. They were a reaction to the prison she had built for us. I know her side of the story probably makes me sound like a monster. A coward who couldn't just have an honest conversation. But they don't understand. Honesty wouldn't have worked. It would have been months of couples therapy, of her promising to change, of her family and friends pressuring me to forgive her. I would still be trapped. I had to blow up the whole damn thing to get out. My plan wasn't kind, but it was necessary. I'm free now. And when I tell the story, everyone agrees I'm the one who got away.
Story 4.
I know what my wife must have told people. I know I'm the bad guy in this story. The husband who lost his job and then lost his mind. The guy who accused his wife of cheating and demanded a paternity test for our son. I get it. From the outside it looks simple. But it was never simple. It was never about her. It was about me and the fact that I was drowning. Before all this, I was a man. I don't mean that in some macho chest-thumping way. I just mean I had a role. I had a purpose. I worked in logistics, a decent job with a decent salary. I got up every morning, put on a clean shirt, and went out into the world to solve problems. I provided. My wife Sarah had her career in marketing, and we were a team. We were equals. When our son Leo was born, everything was perfect. We had the house, the kid, the life we were supposed to have. I was a father, and I was a husband, and I was a provider. I knew who I was. Then the world shut down. The pandemic hit my company like a wrecking ball. One day I had a job, and the next I was packing up a cardboard box from my desk. Sarah's job was safe. She could work from home. Daycare closed. Suddenly I wasn't the provider anymore. I was the caregiver. At first it was fine. A novelty. More time with Leo, right, but the weeks turned into months. Sarah's world stayed big. She had Zoom calls, deadlines, important projects. Her office door would be closed for hours while I was in the living room, a prisoner in a kingdom of plastic toys and endless snacks. My world shrank until it was just the four walls of our house. My daily problems weren't supply chain issues anymore. They were about negotiating nap times and figuring out why a 3-year-old was screaming about the wrong color cup. I love my son. I need to say that because I know it sounds like I don't. I do. But my love for him got tangled up in my resentment for the life he represented. He was the anchor holding me in a place I didn't want to be. Every time he cried for me, every "Daddy, watch this," it was a reminder that this was my entire existence now. I wasn't a man with a career anymore. I was just Daddy. I felt my identity chipping away day by day. I was becoming a warden, not a father. That's when the thought started. It was small at first, just a weird, quiet whisper in the back of my mind during a particularly bad tantrum. Asterisk. What if this isn't my lifetimes? It was a crazy thought, and I'd push it away. but it kept coming back stronger each time. My anxiety latched onto it. It wasn't a logical thought. I never, not for 1 second, actually believed Sarah had cheated on me. I trusted her completely. This was different. This was a fantasy. A way out. The thought grew into a feeling. A deep physical gut feeling that Leo and I weren't connected. I'd look at him while he slept and feel nothing but a strange distance. He had Sarah's eyes, her smile. I couldn't see myself in him at all. The more I thought about it, the more real it felt. This feeling became my obsession. It was the only thing that gave me a strange, twisted kind of hope. If he wasn't my son, then this wasn't my life. I wasn't a failure who lost his job and got trapped at home. I was just a guy who had been living the wrong story. I could walk away. I could be free. It took me a month to get the courage to say it out loud. I found Sarah in the kitchen one night after Leo was asleep. I tried to explain it the best I could. I told her about the anxiety, the feeling that the walls were closing in. I told her something felt fundamentally wrong and that I couldn't shake this horrible feeling of disconnection from our son. I told her I needed a paternity test. The look on her face broke me. It wasn't understanding. It was pure, unfiltered hurt. She didn't hear a desperate man asking for help. She heard an accusation. "You think I cheated on you?" she asked, her voice trembling. I tried to explain again that it wasn't about her, it was about me, about my head being messed up. But the damage was done. It became about her honor, her faithfulness. It wasn't about the fact that I felt like I was suffocating every single day. She eventually agreed, but with a condition. We had to do couples therapy. To me, it felt like a punishment. A bunch of pointless talking that would just delay the one thing I needed an answer. It was a rigmarole, a hoop she was making me jump through to get what I wanted. But it was the only way she'd agree, so I said yes. Our first session was over Zoom. A therapist with a kind face and a blurry virtual background asked me how I felt. I told her what I knew she and Sarah wanted to hear. I said I was struggling, that I loved my family, and that I was sure the test would be a relief. I said I hoped the results would kill this anxiety and let me move on. It was a lie. All of it. I wasn't hoping for relief. I was hoping for an escape hatch. Relief would be finding out he wasn't mine. Finding out he was my son would be a life sentence. It would mean this was real. This was my life forever. There would be no way out. We did the test a few days later. A kit came in the mail, we swabbed our cheeks and Leo's, and we sent it back. Then we waited. It was the longest week of my life. Every time I looked at Leo, my heart pounded. Please, 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 I'd think. Let me be wrong about being his father. The email arrived on a Tuesday, just an hour before our next scheduled therapy session. The subject line was, "Clinical, your paternity test results are available." My hands started shaking so badly I could barely use the mouse. Sarah was already logged into the Zoom call from her office upstairs. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and joined the meeting. The therapist's face popped up next to Sarah's. "Hi, John," she said gently. "How are you feeling?" "The results came," I said. My voice was hoarse. Sarah's eyes were wide. She looked terrified and hopeful all at once. "Did you open it?" "No," I said. "Not yet." "Would you like to do it together now?" the therapist asked. "We can talk through whatever comes up." I nodded, unable to speak. My world had shrunk to the size of that single email in my inbox. My entire future was inside it. Freedom or prison. I moved the cursor over the email, my finger hovering over the trackpad. This was it. The last door. I took a deep breath that didn't feel like it reached my lungs, and I clicked. The page loaded. It was a PDF, all clinical and official looking, with a company logo at the top. I scanned past the jargon, my eyes hunting for the one thing that mattered. And there it was, in a bolded box near the bottom, asterisk. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. Asterisk. The words below it swam in my vision. Jonathan Miller is not excluded as the biological father of the child Leo Miller. Asterisk. Is not excluded. Asterisk. The air in my lungs turned to cement. It was over. The last door, the one tiny insane escape hatch I'd been clinging to for months, had just been slammed, bolted, and barricaded in my face. This was it. This was my life. There was no alternate story. I wasn't the victim of a misunderstanding. I was just a guy who lost his job and was trapped in a life he hated. I was a failure. And I was a father. John, the therapist's voice came through my laptop, speakers tinny and distant. What does it say? Sarah was leaning into her camera, her face a mess of anxiety. John, please. I couldn't form a sentence. I just stared at the screen. 99.9%. A life sentence handed down in a percentage. He's mine, I finally managed to say. The words felt like poison in my mouth. I heard Sarah let out a huge sob of relief. I could see her on the screen, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking. The therapist was smiling gently. Well, she said, that must be a huge weight off your shoulders, John. How are you feeling hearing that confirmed? How was I feeling? I felt like I had just watched my own execution. Relief was the last thing I felt. It was rage. A hot, silent, suffocating rage at the universe, at my bad luck, at my own trapped existence. My fantasy was dead. My hope was dead. I looked up at the camera. I tried to arrange my face into something that looked human. It's done, I said, my voice flat. That's it. It's done. Okay, the therapist said, her smile faltering a little. We can talk about what done means. Sarah, how are you feeling? Sarah wiped her eyes. I'm just so relieved, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I knew it, of course, but hearing it. Now we can move on. We can fix this. She looked at my little square on her screen. Right, John, we can fix this now. I didn't answer. I just kept my eyes on the screen. The number, 99.9%. John, the therapist prompted gently. Your silence is very powerful right now. Can you tell us what's going through your head? Nothing, I lied. It's just a lot to process. It's done, that's all. The rest of the session was a blur. Sarah and the therapist talked about moving forward, about rebuilding trust. I just nodded along, giving one-word answers. It was like watching a TV show about someone else's life. As soon as the therapist said our time was up, I closed the laptop without saying goodbye. I sat there in the silence of my study, the quiet hum of the computer the only sound. A few minutes later I heard footsteps on the stairs. Sarah came in and stood in the doorway. She had been crying, but she was smiling now. A real hopeful smile. It made my stomach turn. "Hey," she said softly. "I know that was hard. But it's over now. The crazy part is over." She came over and tried to put her arms around my shoulders from behind. I flinched, pulling away like she'd burned me. She froze. "John, what's wrong? This is good news." I stood up and turned to face her. "Is it?" I asked, and the bitterness in my own voice surprised me. Her smile vanished. "What do you mean? Of course it is. He's your son, our son. We can finally put this nightmare behind us." "You can," I said. "You get to be relieved. You get to be the good guy." "The good guy? What are you talking about? There are no good guys and bad guys, John. We're a family that's been struggling." She reached for my hand. "Talk to me. Tell me what you're feeling. I want to understand." And that's when I snapped. How could I possibly explain it to her? How could I say, "I'm not relieved, Sarah. I'm grieving. I'm devastated that our wonderful son is actually mine because I was praying he wasn't. I was hoping for a get-out-of-jail-free card and I didn't get it." It was a monstrous thought. It was the ugliest, most selfish thing a person could feel, and it was the absolute truth. Saying it out loud would make me a monster. But the monster was already there, scratching to get out. So I let it out. "You want to know what I'm feeling?" I yelled. The force of it shocked us both. I feel trapped. I feel like I'm suffocating in this house, in this life. This test was my only way out, and now it's gone. The color drained from her face. She looked at me like she'd never seen me before. "Your way out. A way out of what? Your family?" "Yes," I screamed, the word tearing out of my throat. "A way out of being a full-time nanny. A way out of a life where my biggest accomplishment of the day is getting a toddler to eat 3 bites of broccoli. I had a life before this. I had a purpose. Now I have nothing." Tears were streaming down her face now. "You have a son," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You have me. And what a prize that is." I spat back the cruelty, feeling good like punching a wall. "I'm stuck here with a life I never wanted, and you want me to be happy about it." It was horrible. Every word was a sledgehammer, and I knew I was destroying everything, but I couldn't stop. The rage that had been building for months was finally boiling over. I was burning down my own life because I couldn't stand to live in it anymore. She just stared at me, her expression turning from hurt to horror and then to a cold, hard anger I'd never seen before. "Get out," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through my yelling like a knife. "What?" "Get out of my house. Go." The fight went out of me, replaced by a sudden terrifying emptiness. She was right. What else was there to do? I had let the monster out, and it had devoured everything. I didn't say another word. I walked past her, went upstairs to our bedroom, and pulled a duffel bag from the closet. I threw in some shirts, jeans, my toothbrush. I could hear her sobbing downstairs. As I walked past Leo's room, I saw the door was cracked open. His little blue lamp was on, casting a soft glow on his race car wallpaper. For a second I thought about looking in, but I couldn't. I couldn't face him. I went downstairs. Sarah was standing by the front door, her arms wrapped around herself. She wouldn't look at me. I walked out, closed the door behind me, and didn't look back. I'm at my brother's place now, sleeping on his couch. It's been 3 days. I know I'm the villain. I know I broke my wife's heart and betrayed my son in the worst way possible. I see that. But even now, sitting here in the quiet, all I feel is that same suffocating sense of being trapped. The paternity test didn't set me free. It just confirmed that the prison was real. I had hoped it would give me an excuse to leave my life, but instead I just blew it up. I had to get out. I couldn't be a husband and I couldn't be a father because somewhere along the way I completely forgot how to be a man.
Story 5.
My name is Mike. I'm 31, and if you're reading this, you've probably already heard my wife's version of the story. I'm sure I sound like a monster. The husband who cheated. The guy who planned to ruin her. I get it. From the outside it looks simple. But nothing is ever that simple. 5 years ago I married Sarah. We were a team. It was us against the world, building a life from scratch. We both worked, we split the bills, we talked about everything. When our son Leo was born 3 years ago, it felt like we had everything. He was this perfect little person we made together. We were solid. Then Sarah's career took off. She's brilliant, I've always known that, and she got a manager position at her firm. The money was great, better than I was making. At first I was her biggest cheerleader. I was so damn proud. I'd brag about her to my friends. That's my wife, I'd say. But slowly something started to change. We became she. Our life started to revolve around her job. Dinners out were always with her colleagues, and the conversation was always about her latest project, her team's success, her quarterly goals. I'd just sit there and nod the supportive husband. I went from being Mike to being Sarah's husband. At home, she'd walk in the door, drop her bag, and just vent about her day for an hour. Her stress, her deadlines, her annoying coworker. I'd listen, of course. That's what a husband does. But when I tried to talk about my day, about my job, her eyes would glaze over. It was like my life was too small to register on her radar. My world became about logistics. I was the one who had to leave work early if Leo was sick. I was the one who handled daycare pickup and drop-off because her schedule was too important. I wasn't a partner anymore. I was support staff. My own ambitions, my own problems, they all just seemed to fade into the background. She probably told you I've been distant and argumentative lately. She's not wrong. I was trying to fight for my place in our marriage. An argument was the only time I felt like she was actually looking at me, even if it was with anger. I was trying to claw my way back into the story of our life, but she was the only one holding the pen. The COVID lockdowns made it 100 times worse. She set up her office in our spare room, and her work life just took over our entire apartment. She was more powerful and present than ever, barking orders on Zoom calls, while I felt like I was shrinking in my own home. I was just the guy who had to keep a 3-year-old quiet so the important work could get done. That's when I met Chloe. It was early 2019, before the world shut down completely. She works at a coffee shop I used to go to near my office. She's 20. And before you judge, you need to understand it wasn't about her age or even about sex, not really. It was about being seen, When I talked to her, she actually listened. She'd ask me about my job, like it mattered. She laughed at my stupid jokes. She looked at me like I was a man, not just an accessory to a successful woman. With her, I felt like the main character for the first time in years. It was a relief. It was a pathetic, selfish relief, but it felt like breathing after being underwater for too long. The fighting with Sarah got worse. It was always about something small, me leaving a dish in the sink or being 5 minutes late to pick up Leo. But it was never about the dish. It was about her thinking I wasn't pulling my weight, that I wasn't living up to the standards she had set for our life, or times her times life. Last week we had a really bad one. I don't even remember what started it. It ended with her saying something like, "I don't know what your problem is, but you need to figure it out. I don't have time for this." She went to bed and I just sat in the living room in the dark. I felt completely invisible. Empty. I opened my laptop and just started browsing online. I ended up on Quora on one of those "what's the most messed up thing you've ever thought about" threads. And I just started typing. It was like poison draining out of me. I wrote about the affair. I wrote about how trapped I felt. And then I started building a fantasy. A world where I wasn't the loser. A world where I was the one in control. I wrote out this whole crazy plan. What if I was the one who left? What if I could take Leo, drain our accounts, and leave times her times with nothing? Who would win then? It was a power trip. A stupid late-night scream into the void. To make it feel more real, to make my fantasy of having power feel solid for just 1 second, I used our full names. Sarah's. Leo's. It was a horrible thing to do, but in that moment it made me feel like I had some control over a life that felt like it was spinning away from me. I finally finished writing around 3 a.m. and felt sick to my stomach, but also exhausted. I stumbled into bed and fell asleep. I didn't think about it again. The next morning felt normal. Too normal. I got up, made coffee, got Leo his favorite cereal. Sarah was in the shower getting ready for work. I left my laptop open on the kitchen island, still on that Quora page. It wasn't a trap. It wasn't a plan. It was just a stupid, careless mistake. Proof of just how tired and checked out I was. I was in Leo's room helping him put on his shoes when I heard the water in the shower turn off. A few minutes later, I walked back into the kitchen, ready to start the usual morning rush of getting everyone out the door. But it was quiet. Sarah was standing by the island, her back to me. She was still in her towel, her hair dripping onto the floor. She wasn't getting her coffee. She wasn't checking her phone. She was just standing there perfectly still, looking down at the open laptop. The silence in the kitchen was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. It was a physical thing pressing in on my ears. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the quiet gurgle of the coffee maker. Sounds I'd never noticed before were now deafening in the absence of her voice. "Sarah," I said, and my own voice sounded wrong. She turned around slowly. Her face proud. It wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was just blank. Like a switch had been flipped, and all the light had gone out behind her eyes. That was 1,000 times scarier than if she'd been screaming. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt like a bug under a microscope. "Who's Chloe?" she asked. Her voice was flat, with no emotion at all. It was the voice she used on conference calls when a deal was going bad. clinical, detached. My blood ran cold. The stupid, pathetic power fantasy was laid bare. My throat felt tight. Sarah, listen. It's not what you think. I can explain. She held up a hand to stop me, a gesture so sharp and final it was, like she'd slapped me. No, you can't, she said, her eyes still locked on mine. Because I read it. I read all of it. She glanced back at the screen. You were going to drain the joint account. You were going to try and prove I was an unfit mother. You were going to take Leo. Each sentence was a hammer blow. It was just a stupid post online, I said, my voice cracking. I was mad. I was trying to. I don't know vent. It was a fantasy. It wasn't real. How do you explain that? How do you say I wrote that I wanted to destroy you and take our son because I feel so small and weak? It sounds insane. It sounds like the confession of a monster. She laughed, but it was a dead sound. It had no humor in it. A fantasy, Mike. You used our son's full name. You wrote down his life as a bargaining chip in your little revenge story. You fantasized about ruining me. About taking my child from me. The only thing you love more than your career, you wrote. She was quoting my own words back to me. That's not a fantasy. That's a plan. It wasn't a plan. I left the laptop open, for God's sake. If it was a plan, would I have done that? I don't know what you are anymore, she whispered, and that was what finally broke me. The anger drained away, and all that was left was shame. The man I married wouldn't even be capable of thinking these things, let alone writing them down for the whole world to see. She walked past me, pulling her towel tighter around her, and went into our bedroom. The door clicked shut. I stood there in the middle of the kitchen, feeling the whole world tilt on its axis. Leo called from his room, "Daddy, my shoe is on the wrong foot." I went to him on autopilot, my hands shaking as I fixed his sneakers. He was just a little kid babbling about his daycare friends, completely unaware that his family had just been blown apart in the next room. I hugged him, burying my face in his hair, smelling that little kid smell of shampoo and cereal. It was the most painful moment of my life. When I came out, Sarah was dressed. She had her work clothes on, her face was set like stone. She didn't look at me. "You need to leave," she said, her voice still eerily calm. "Sarah, please. Let's just talk." "There's nothing to talk about. I read your confession. I know about the affair. I know what you think of me. And I know what you plan to do to me and our son. Now I want you to pack a bag, and I want you to get out of my house. Asterisk. My Time's house. Not our house." Just like that, it was over. I didn't argue anymore. What was the point? I went into the bedroom and threw some clothes into a duffel bag. She stood in the doorway and watched me, her arms crossed. Her expression never changed. She was watching a stranger, a threat. When I was done, I walked to the front door. Can I say goodbye to Leo?" She just nodded. I knelt down and gave him another hug. "I'll see you soon, buddy. Daddy just has to go away for a little bit." He didn't understand. He just hugged me back and said, "Okay, Daddy, see you later." I walked out the door without looking back. I couldn't bear to see her face again. The last week has been a blur. I'm staying in a cheap motel off the highway. It smells like old smoke and sadness. I tried calling and texting her for the first 2 days. Dozens of messages. I'm sorry. Please, we can fix this. I love you. I miss Leo. I got no response. Then 3 days ago, I got an email. It wasn't from her. It was from a lawyer. A formal notice. She was filing for divorce and requesting an emergency custody order, citing the Quora post as evidence of my intent to cause harm and abduct our child. My sick, stupid fantasy, my scream into the void, was now Exhibit A in the destruction of my life. I haven't even tried to call Chloe. What would I say? The affair feels like it happened to another person in another lifetime. It was an escape, a symptom of the problem, but it wasn't the disease. The disease was in me. This bottomless pit of resentment and insecurity that made me feel like the only way to build myself up was to imagine tearing my wife down. I wrote that post to feel powerful, to feel like the protagonist in my own life. For once. And now I've never been more powerless. I sit in this motel room scrolling through old pictures of Sarah and Leo on my phone. Pictures from when we were a team. When I was a husband and a father, not just support staff. Not just a monster. I wanted to feel like I mattered. In trying to imagine a world where I couldn't lose, I lost everything. She saw me all right. She saw the absolute worst part of me, the part I didn't even know was there until I typed it out. And now that's all I'll ever be to her. I didn't want to destroy her. I just wanted her to see me. Now I have no one to blame but myself that she can't stand the sight of me.
Story 6.
My whole life has been about him. Let's call him Liam. He isn't just my boyfriend. He's my North Star, the fixed point I've always navigated by. We started dating when we were 14, two stupid kids who thought we knew everything about love. It turns out we were right, at least about each other. When it was time for college, we knew we couldn't stay together. We were going to schools 1,000 miles apart, and we didn't want to ruin what we had with a messy long-distance relationship. So we broke up. But it was never really a breakup. It was a promise. A see you later. We both knew without ever having to say the exact words that we were endgame. So I waited. I went to college, I got a degree, I started a career back in our hometown, and I waited for him to come back. For almost a decade, my life was on pause. Friends would ask me why I was still single, why I never seemed to get serious with anyone. How could I explain that I was already taken by a promise made when I was a teenager? People would look at me like I was crazy. Maybe I was. I watched all my friends meet people, fall in love, get engaged, buy houses. Their lives were moving forward, building chapter by chapter. Mine felt like I was stuck on the prologue, just waiting for the main character to show up. The loneliness was the worst part. It's a heavy, crushing weight, especially on a random Tuesday night when you're scrolling through someone else's wedding photos. You start to doubt everything. Was he still on the same page? Was I wasting my 20s waiting for a dream that might never come true? That's where the Tinder guy came in. I need you to understand it wasn't about him. I don't even remember his last name. He was from out of town, just passing through. It was a moment of weakness, a single night where I just wanted to feel wanted. I wanted to feel like a normal 27-year-old, not a girl in a glass case waiting for her prince to return. It was a brief distraction from the constant aching patience of waiting for my real life to begin with Liam. We used a condom. It was supposed to be safe, meaningless, and forgotten. A tiny footnote in the story of us that no one would ever have to read. Then a few months later it happened. Liam called and told me he was moving home. For good. It was like the sun finally came out after a long gray winter. The world which had felt tilted and wrong for years finally clicked into place. The day he got back, he came straight to my apartment. The second I opened the door, it was like no time had passed at all. That first night together was magic. It was a homecoming. With Liam, there's a trust that's so deep it's part of my DNA. We never used condoms. We never had. We were safe. We were home. We fell back into our old rhythm so easily. It was perfect. We were finally starting the life we had both put on hold for so long. Then a few weeks later I realized my period was late. I told myself it was just stress or the excitement of him being back throwing my body off. But another week passed and still nothing. My heart started hammering in my chest every time I thought about it. I finally bought a test, my hands shaking so badly I could barely open the box. I sat on the edge of the tub and watched in horror as 2 pink lines appeared. My blood ran cold. Pregnant. How? The timing was all wrong. I called my doctor and made an appointment for an ultrasound, my voice a strangled whisper. Liam came with me, holding my hand, trying to be supportive, but I could see the confusion and fear in his eyes mirroring my own. In the dark, quiet room, the technician moved the cold wand over my stomach, and there it was on the screen. A tiny, flickering bean. "Okay," the doctor said, smiling kindly. "Everything looks good. Based on the measurements, you're about 6 weeks along." 6 weeks. The words echoed in my head, but they didn't make sense. It was like trying to solve a math problem where the numbers didn't add up. My mind raced backward, counting the days, the weeks. 6 weeks ago, Liam was still in another state, packing his life into boxes. He hadn't been here. He wasn't home yet. But the Tinder guy was. My one stupid, lonely, meaningless mistake had just planted a bomb in the middle of the future I had waited 13 years to build. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I had to tell him. That night, sitting on my couch, I watched the hope and happiness literally drain from his face as I explained the dates. I saw the man I loved, my future, my everything shatter right in front of me. And it was all my fault. The days that followed were the worst of my life. It was like living with a ghost. He was there, but he was gone. He was quiet, distant. Every time I looked at him, I could see him calculating, replaying everything, trying to understand how this could have happened. I could feel him slipping away. The promise we had built our lives on was crumbling to dust, and my panic was a physical thing, a constant knot of acid in my stomach. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I was losing him. After all this waiting, I was going to lose him for good over a single pathetic night of loneliness. I talked to my mom. I cried to my best friend. They all said the same thing in their own gentle ways. It was an impossible situation. It was him or the baby. But for me, it was never a choice. It couldn't be. Liam was the plan. Liam was the entire point. The baby, this stranger's baby, was a complication, a terrible accident that was threatening to undo everything I had ever wanted. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't lose him. So, I made the hardest decision of my life. With a shaking hand, I called the clinic. I scheduled the appointment. I had to fix this. I had to prove to him that he was what mattered. That times we, times were what mattered. My stomach was in knots as I drove to his place, the words I needed to say stuck in my throat. I had to show him I was choosing him, that I was choosing us, and that I would do anything to erase this mistake. I walked up to his door, took a deep, shuddering breath, and knocked. He opened the door, and my heart just dropped. He looked awful. He had dark circles under his eyes, and he looked like he hadn't really slept in days, which was probably true. I hadn't either. The air between us was so thick and heavy, full of all the things we weren't saying. I was sure this was it. This was the moment he was going to say, "I can't do this," and my life would be over. Before he could say anything, the words just spilled out of me in a panicked rush. I made an appointment. He just stared at me, his expression blank. An appointment for what? For the abortion. I choked out tears already starting to well up in my eyes. I scheduled it. I'm taking care of it. I'm fixing this. I felt my voice breaking, my whole body shaking. It's you, Liam. It's always been you. I waited my entire life for you to come home. I can't lose you now. I won't. This thing, this mistake, it can't be more important than us. Nothing is more important than us. I was full-on sobbing by then, the kind of ugly crying you can't control. I just stood there on his doorstep, completely falling apart, basically begging him to see that I was choosing him. That I would always choose him. I expected him to look relieved or angry or something. But he didn't. He just stepped forward, wrapped his arms around me, and pulled me inside. He held me while I cried into his shirt, his hands stroking the back of my head. He didn't say anything for a long time, just let me get it all out. When my sobs finally started to quiet down, he gently pushed me back so he could look at me. "Hey," he said, his voice soft. "Look at me. I need you to cancel that appointment." My blood ran cold all over again. Oh God, he was going to break up with me anyway. He didn't want me to do it for him. "No," I whispered. "Liam, please, you don't understand." "No, times you, times don't understand," he said, cutting me off gently. I think we might be wrong. About everything." I just stared at him, confused. What was he talking about? "I haven't been sleeping," he said, leading me to the couch. "I've just been online reading. For days. I've read every medical website, every pregnancy forum, everything I could find. And we got it wrong. The doctor said you were 6 weeks pregnant. And we thought that meant we did it 6 weeks ago." "Right," I said, my voice hoarse. "And you weren't here." "Right," he agreed. "But that's not how it works. That's not how they date a pregnancy. They count it from the first day of your last period. Not from when you know." I felt my brain stutter, trying to process his words. My last period. I thought back. When was it? My cycle was always regular. I did the math in my head, my heart starting to pound in a completely new way. My last period started about 2 weeks before I slept with that guy, and about 3.5 weeks before Liam came home. Liam saw the look on my face. He grabbed a piece of paper and a pen from his coffee table and started scribbling down dates. "Your last period started here," he said, circling a date. Conception usually happens about 2 weeks after that. "So if you got pregnant around times here, asterisk." He drew another circle. The new circle landed squarely on the weekend he came home. On the night we were finally together again. A tiny, impossible sliver of hope cut through the fog of my despair. It was so fragile I was afraid to even breathe on it. "But are you sure?" I whispered. "How could we both get that so wrong?" "Because we're not doctors," he said, a little bit of the old Liam flashing in his eyes. We panicked. We heard 6 weeks, and we just assumed the worst. But if this is right, it means the baby could be mine. The baby could be his. Our baby. The thought was so huge, so overwhelming, it almost knocked the wind out of me. The wait for the paternity test was actual torture. We canceled the clinic appointment, and the next day we were at a doctor's office for a non-invasive prenatal paternity test. They just took some of my blood and a cheek swab from him. They said the results would take about a week. That week felt longer than the 10 years I'd waited for him to come home. We were in limbo. We weren't fighting anymore, but we weren't fixed either. We were just holding our breath. We clung to each other, both terrified of the hope we were feeling. What if we let ourselves believe it only to have it ripped away? It felt safer to stay in the miserable certainty we had before. But we couldn't. That tiny sliver of hope was there, and it was growing every day. We were a team again, waiting for a verdict that would decide the entire course of our lives. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. The subject line was just, "Your test results." I saw it pop up on my phone while I was at work, and I swear my heart stopped. I called Liam immediately. "It's here." "I'm on my way," he said, and hung up. I left work and met him at my apartment. We sat on the couch side by side, my phone in my hand. I couldn't bring myself to open it. My hands were shaking too badly. He took the phone from me, his own hands not much steadier than mine. He opened the email, pulled up the attached file, and we both leaned in to read the single life-altering line at the same time. Asterisk. Probability of paternity, 99.99. 9%, asterisk. The relief was so powerful it felt like a physical wave hitting me. It knocked all the air from my lungs and all the strength from my body. I just collapsed against him, sobbing again, but this time it wasn't from fear or grief. It was from pure, unbelievable joy. He wrapped his arms around me, burying his face in my hair, and I could feel him shaking too. We just held on to each other and cried on that couch, letting all the fear and pain and anxiety of the past few weeks wash away. It wasn't a nightmare. It was a miracle. We were so wrapped up in the panic and the guilt of my mistake that we misunderstood everything. My one night of loneliness hadn't destroyed our future. Our love on that very first night he came home had created a new one. It was real. It was ours. This baby wasn't a complication or a mistake. This baby was proof. Proof that we really were endgame. Proof that we were meant to be. My stupid, foolish mistake almost cost me everything, but in the end our love was stronger. It had been all along.
Story 7.
My brother's wife probably thinks I'm some kind of monster. I guess that's fair from her side. But people only ever see the final act. They don't see the year of silent suffering that leads up to it. They don't see what it's like to be me. My name is Michael. I'm an ER doctor. For the last 2 years, that has meant living in a constant state of emergency. My life is a soundtrack of beeping machines, coughing, and the sound of families getting the worst news of their lives through a phone. I go to work, I fight a war, I lose more often than I win, and then I come home. And for the longest time, coming home was just as bad. Home was this big, quiet house that felt haunted by my failed marriage. My wife Stephanie and I had been separated for over a year before we finally started the divorce paperwork. People think a marriage ends with a big fight, a dramatic affair. Ours didn't. It just died. It was a slow, quiet death by 1,000 little cuts. A forgotten anniversary here, a resentful sigh there. We stopped talking, then we stopped touching, then we just stopped seeing each other, even when we were in the same room. By the end, we were just two strangers who hated the way the other one breathed. The silence in that house after she left was deafening. My son, my 6-year-old, is the only thing that kept me going. But honestly, most days I feel like I'm failing him too. I come home exhausted mentally and physically, broken from the hospital, and I have nothing left to give. I'm just a ghost, walking around making sure he's fed and put to bed on time. Then she started coming over. My brother, Greg's wife. When her office went fully remote and my son's daycare closed, it just made sense. She could work from my place and watch him. I've known her forever, since she was just the quiet girl who was friends with Greg's crowd. She was always just there. A steady, calm presence in the background. When Greg married her, I remember feeling this little twist in my gut. It wasn't jealousy. It was more like recognition. Of course. Of course he ended up with her. He found his anchor. Having her in my house changed everything. The silence was gone. I'd come home from a 12-hour shift, braced for that awful quiet, and instead, I'd hear her laughing with my son in the living room. She didn't just put him in front of a TV. She built forts with him. She read him stories. She helped him with his little homework packets. She filled my house with a warmth it hadn't had in years. She brought it back to life. Our interactions were always brief. Hey, thanks again for today. No problem, he was great. His spelling is getting really good. Just logistics about my son. But in those few minutes every evening, as she was packing up her laptop and I was trying to decontaminate from the hospital, I felt more of a connection than I had in the last 5 years with Stephanie. I started living for those 3 minutes. I started seeing the life I was supposed to have, the partner I should have chosen. This wasn't some cheap fantasy. It was a realization. It was like a light turned on in a dark room, showing me that the miserable little corner I'd been living in wasn't the only option. The feeling grew from gratitude to respect, and then it turned into something I couldn't ignore anymore. I was in love with her. Admitting that to myself was the hardest and easiest thing I've ever done. It was the truth. And once I saw it, I knew I couldn't keep living the lie of my marriage to Stephanie. My feelings for her gave me the courage to finally end things for good. You can't hold a truth like that inside forever. It starts to poison you. Every time I saw her, it got harder to just say thanks and let her walk out the door. I started reading into things. The way she'd smile when I walked in, a real, genuine smile. The way she'd ask how my day was and actually listen to the answer. I convinced myself she felt it too. How could she not? She was bringing my home back to life, and I was the only thing keeping her from a life of true happiness. She was the peace to my chaos. We were a perfect match, and my brother was just a placeholder from her past. Last week I came home and the pressure was just unbearable. I'd had a horrible day. Lost a patient who was younger than me. I walked in and there she was, humming to herself while she wiped down the kitchen counter. My son was asleep on the couch. The scene was so perfectly domestic, so peaceful. It was everything I wanted. I knew I couldn't let another day go by without telling her. It wasn't fair to me, to her, or even to Greg. Everyone deserved to know the truth. My heart was beating out of my chest as she started gathering her things. "Don't go yet," I said. My voice sounded strange. She stopped looking at me with that gentle, questioning expression. And it all just came pouring out. I didn't plan it, I just let the truth speak. I told her I was in love with her. I told her that coming home to her and my son was the only thing that got me through my days. I told her that she was the reason I finally had the strength to divorce Stephanie, because she showed me what real partnership, real warmth looked like. I needed her to understand this wasn't some silly crush. This was real. This was the most real thing in my life. I remember saying something like, "I understand your year with Greg," trying to show her that I got it, that she had obligations, that I wasn't expecting her to just pack a bag and leave him tonight. I just needed her to know. I needed the truth to finally be out in the open between us. I laid it all out, my entire broken, bleeding heart. Her face just went blank. The warmth was gone. It was like a mask of polite shock fell over her. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she just shook her head a little, mumbled something about Greg needing her home for dinner, and she was out the door before I could say another word. She fled. At first I told myself it was fine. Of course she was shocked. I had just dropped a bomb on her life. She needed time. She needed space to think, to process what this meant for her, for us. To let what her heart was feeling catch up to the reality of her situation. So I gave her space. The next day she texted, Asterisk, so sorry, can't make it today, swamped with work. Asterisk. The day after that, another excuse. It's been a week now. A full week of her being too busy to come over. The silence in the house is back, and it's 100 times worse than before. My son keeps asking when she's coming back to build Legos with him, and I don't know what to tell him. I've put everything on the line for one moment of pure, terrifying honesty, and I'm being treated like a creep. Greg hasn't called or texted, which is the only thing giving me any hope. It means she hasn't told him. Why wouldn't she tell him unless a part of her was considering it? Unless she was scared of the truth too, she must be fighting it. I did this because when you're drowning, you have to reach for the one thing that looks like a life raft. And now I'm just floating in the wreckage waiting. My phone just buzzed on the counter. I picked it up, my heart jumping, hoping it was her. It wasn't. It was from Greg. Asterisk. Can you talk? Asterisk. My stomach dropped. For a whole week I'd been living on this thin, stupid thread of hope that she hadn't told him. That the silence meant she was thinking, considering weighing her comfortable life against a real passionate one. That text message cut the thread. I typed back my thumb, shaking slightly. Asterisk. Yeah. I can talk. Asterisk. I suggested he come over. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if he saw the space where she had brought so much life, he'd understand. Maybe it was a punishment for myself. My phone rang almost immediately. It wasn't a call, it was another text. Asterisk. No. I'm not coming to your house. Meet me at the park by the river in an hour. Asterisk. The coldness of it was a slap in the face. We'd been brothers for 38 years. We didn't meet in parks. We went to each other's houses. This was different. This was a business meeting for the end of a relationship. When I got there, he was already on a bench staring at the water. He didn't look angry, not in the way I expected. He just looked tired. Old. I suddenly realized how much she had hurt him by telling him, and a sick part of me was glad she had. It made things real. I sat down, leaving a careful space between us. For a few minutes, neither of us said anything. She told me what you said, he finally said, his voice flat. He didn't look at me. Greg, Don't he cut me off. Just don't start with your excuses. I want to understand one thing. Why? Why would you do that to her? To me? Here it was. The moment to make him see. It wasn't about hurting you. I started trying to keep my voice steady. My life. Greg, you have no idea what it's been like. The hospital is a nightmare I can't wake up from. My marriage was a ghost. I was drowning. And then she was there. She brought light back into my house. Into my son's life. Into my life. I told him everything. About the silence, about Stephanie, about how coming home and seeing her was the only good part of my day. I tried to explain that it wasn't a choice. It was a truth that grew inside me until I had to speak it, or it would have killed me. This wasn't some cheap shot, man. I fell in love with her, I said, my voice cracking a little. She showed me what a real partner is. I told her because she deserved to know that someone saw her, really saw her, for the amazing person she is. She deserves a love like that. Greg finally turned to look at me, and his face was just blank. There was no sympathy there. A love like that, a love that ambushes her in her brother-in-law's kitchen, a love that makes her feel unsafe in her own family, that's your grand gesture. You don't understand. No, Michael, you don't understand. His voice was suddenly sharp-cutting. You think you're the hero of some tragic romance. You're not. You're just a sad, lonely man who decided to blow up my life because you couldn't handle your own. Every word was a punch. She's been a wreck all week, he went on, his voice low and furious now. She feels violated. She keeps asking me what she did wrong, what signals she gave off to make you think that was okay. You didn't see a lifeline. You saw a woman being kind to your kid, and you built a whole fantasy around it because you're too much of a coward to fix your own life. That's not true. My feelings for her are what gave me the strength to leave Stephanie, I shot back, desperate. Greg just laughed a bitter, ugly sound. Oh, that makes it so much better. You used my wife as a justification to end your own failed marriage. You projected all your hopes and dreams onto her without ever once stopping to think about her. about what she wants, about her life, about me. He pointed at his chest. Your brother. He stood up, looking down at me. She told me what you said. I understand your year with Greg. What the hell does that even mean? You think our marriage is just some placeholder? You think you know anything about us? You know nothing? You saw what you wanted to see? I had nothing to say. He was twisting it all, making it ugly. He wasn't seeing the purity of it, the honesty. We're done, Michael, he said. The words hung in the air. Don't call me. Don't call her. You're not to come to our house. I don't want you anywhere near my wife. My parents will want to know why you're not at Thanksgiving. You can figure out what lie you want to tell them. I'll just tell them the truth. He started to walk away. Greg, wait, I called out, my voice sounding pathetic. She didn't tell you right away. She waited a week. Doesn't that mean something? He stopped and turned back, and the pity in his eyes was worse than the anger. It means she was so horrified and confused she didn't know how to tell her husband that his own brother had done something so selfish and destructive. It meant she was trying to protect me from you. Then he was gone. I just sat there on that bench for I don't know how long. The world I had built in my head, the one where she and I would eventually find our way to each other, had been bulldozed in 5 minutes. It's been a few weeks now. The silence in my house is a physical thing. It has weight. It presses down on me. My son still asks about her. Is she still busy at work, Daddy? He asked last night. I had to look my own child in the eye and lie telling him she got a new project and couldn't come anymore. The look on his face broke a piece of me I didn't even know was left. I lost everything. I thought I was making a noble sacrifice, laying the truth at her feet. But I didn't just lose her. I lost my brother. I lost the last bit of family I felt connected to. I destroyed the one peaceful thing in my life because I couldn't stand to see it from a distance. I had to try and own it. I know I'm supposed to feel guilty. I know I'm supposed to see myself as the villain they think I am. And sometimes in the middle of the night I do. But mostly I just feel angry. Angry that she wasn't brave enough. Angry that Greg couldn't see past his own pride. I showed her a door to a better life, a life of real passion, and she was too scared to even look through it. I was drowning and I reached for the life raft. It's not my fault they decided to chop it up for firewood. It's not my fault they chose to let me sink.
Story 8.
I saw what my husband wrote about me. I guess it's my turn. He painted a picture of a crazy, insecure wife who blew up our marriage over a silly experiment. The truth is, our marriage was already dead. He was just the last one to notice. For the first 6 years, we were a unit. We were that comfortable couple who orders pizza on a Tuesday and gains the same 10 pounds over the holidays. We had our first child, then our second, and we were in the trenches together. Then our son was born, and something in my husband just broke. He found the gym. And I don't mean he started going to the gym. I mean he times it like a religion. At first I was so proud. I loved that he was getting healthy and had a new hobby. I tried to make it our thing. I bought new workout clothes and went with him a few times, but I was clumsy and tired. I was still recovering from a difficult birth, and I just couldn't keep up. So I stopped. And that's when it became times his times world, and I became a problem he needed to fix. Every single conversation became about my diet or my sedentary lifestyle. He'd watch me eat a piece of toast and say something like, "You know that's just empty carbs." He wasn't trying to be mean. He genuinely thought he was helping. That was the worst part. He'd wrap his insults in concern. He'd say things like, "I'll love you no matter what size you are," but the tone was clear. I am a good man for putting up with you. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was his before and after picture that never got to the after. He was the star of this new life he was building, getting leaner and stronger every day, and I was just the frumpy mom he came home to. The breaking point was that dumb Instagram comment. He's right, I never thought he was cheating. But he posted a photo of himself lifting a crazy amount of weight, and the comments were all from his new gym friends. "Looking strong, bro, killing it," and then one from a woman. "Beast mode, you're an inspiration." When I saw it, my heart just sank. It was a stupid, tiny thing, but it was proof. Proof that he had this whole other life with this whole other group of people who saw him as this amazing, powerful man. And where was I? I was at home, covered in baby spit-up, feeling like I was shrinking while he was growing. I tried to explain it to him that night. I told him I felt left out, that I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. He didn't get it. He just got defensive, pulling up her profile to show me she was married. He completely missed the point. The point wasn't her. The point was that he was building a kingdom and I wasn't even allowed in the gates. That's when he came up with his brilliant idea. He was sitting on the edge of the bed with a smug, patient look on his face like a therapist talking to a difficult child. He said we should both make Tinder profiles. Just as an experiment. A confidence boost. For me. He was so sure of himself. So sure that this grand gesture would prove I was still desirable and finally shut me up about my insecurities. It was the most condescending thing anyone has ever said to me. But I said yes. I felt like if I said no, I'd be proving his point. That I was weak and scared. We downloaded the app, paid for Tinder Gold, and set our location to London so no one we knew would see us. He was laughing, making jokes about it. For him, this was a fun little game. For me, it felt like I was about to be graded on my own worth. We put a movie on, and for 2 hours I just stared at the screen, a knot of ice in my stomach. Then the time was up. He checked his phone first. "Huh," he said, "only one." Then I unlocked mine. My screen lit up like a Christmas tree. It was vibrating non-stop. Notifications were flooding in. 330 likes. More than 330. It just kept climbing. I opened the app and it was a sea of faces, men from all over the world. Doctors, lawyers, artists, guys who looked like they belonged on the cover of a magazine, and they all saw my picture and swiped right. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a mom. I didn't feel like a wife. I felt like a woman. A woman that people times wanted asterisk. We sat there on the bed and scrolled through my phone together. I watched the smug little smile fade from his face. The giggly fun mood was gone. He was just quiet, staring at the screen. I saw him swallow hard as a message popped up from a banker in Dubai telling me my smile was incredible. Then he showed me his one match. She was not at all the type of woman he usually finds attractive. and a sound came out of me that I hadn't made in years. I laughed. A real, deep, cruel laugh. I couldn't help it. The dam of all my resentment just broke. I looked him right in the eye, put on my sweetest, most patronizing voice, and said, "Aw, at least I still want you, honey." That was it. That was the moment I saw it. The power in our marriage didn't just shift, it flipped upside down. He had opened this door to prove a point, and now he was terrified of what he'd let in. We both deleted our accounts that night and went to bed without saying another word. But it was too late. The next day, at work, I couldn't focus. All I could think about was that feeling. That buzz of being seen. Was it real or just a fluke I had to know? I pulled out my work laptop, opened a private browser, and typed in the one word that I knew could ruin my life. Or maybe, just maybe, save it, Tinder. It wasn't a fluke. The likes and messages came pouring in again, even faster this time. I made a new profile, one that didn't mention being married or having kids. I used a picture from a few years ago before the baby weight really settled in. I just wanted to see. I told myself it was for science. My own little experiment. It quickly became more than that. It became my secret world. During my lunch break, while the kids were asleep, whenever I had a spare 5 minutes, I was on my laptop living this other life. I was talking to a lawyer in New York who loved my sense of humor. A musician in Berlin who wanted to know all about my day. It was intoxicating. For the first time in years, men were interested in my mind before they even knew about my body. They asked questions. They listened. They weren't trying to fix me. My two best friends, Sarah and Chloe, were my cheerleaders. They'd both gotten out of bad marriages and were thriving. When I finally confessed to them what I was doing, they didn't judge me. They poured me a huge glass of wine and said, "It's about damn time." They told me I deserved to feel wanted. They said my husband had spent years making me feel small, and if this was what it took to feel big again, then I shouldn't feel an ounce of guilt. Their support was like a permission slip. The conversation started to change. The compliments about my smile turned into compliments about my body. The questions about my day turned into questions about what I was wearing. And I leaned into it. I sent pictures, nothing with my face, but pictures that made me feel powerful and sexy. Receiving their replies, seeing how desired I was, felt like a drug. It was a fantasy, I knew that. But my real life had become so bleak that a fantasy was the only thing keeping me afloat. The intimacy with my husband was completely gone. Every time he touched me, it felt like an obligation. Like he was doing his husbandly duty, checking a box. The pity in his eyes was gone, replaced by a nervous confusion, which was almost worse. He was walking on eggshells around me, and, honestly, I liked it. He found out on a Tuesday night. I was on the couch with my laptop, smiling at a message from the guy in New York. My husband came into the room and asked what I was looking at. I quickly closed the laptop, but not before he saw the distinctive orange flame of the Tinder logo. His face just crumpled. "Are you serious?" he whispered. "After everything, you're still on that thing." This was it. The moment I'd been both dreading and craving. I didn't cry. I didn't apologize. I just looked at him. "You opened the door, not me," I said, my voice steady. "You ran an experiment to see if I was still desirable. Well, congratulations. The results are in. I am. He started pacing, running his hands through his hair. This isn't about that. This is about you lying to me, going behind my back, talking to other men. And what about you? I shot back, standing up. What about you spending years making me feel like garbage, like a project you had to work on? You can't just break someone's self-esteem and then get angry when they find a way to build it back up. By cheating, he yelled. This is how you fix things. By sexting strangers. I haven't done anything, not really, I said, and it was true. It was all just words and pictures on a screen. But maybe we should. Both of us. He stopped pacing and stared at me, confused. What are you talking about? And that's when I said it. I think we should have an open marriage. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and cold. I tried to explain it. I told him he was the one who was obsessed with looks, with the gym, with all those fit women who admired him. I was giving him a pass, a way for us to both get what we wanted without the lies. I was trying to make it sound like a logical, modern solution. But he saw right through it. He just shook his head, a look of complete and utter defeat on his face. So, this is it, he said, his voice cracking. This is how you end it. Not by leaving, but by trying to turn our marriage into some kind of free-for-all. He looked at me like he'd never seen me before. I don't even know who you are anymore. I'm the woman you created, I told him. And I meant it. We've been living in a state of limbo ever since. He sleeps in the guest room. We're polite for the kids, like two co-workers who can't stand each other but have to finish a project. The power is all mine now, but the victory feels hollow. The confident, smug man I married is gone, replaced by a sad, quiet ghost who barely looks at me. Some days I miss the man he used to be, the one who would get winded walking up the stairs with me. But then I remember the feeling of his judgment, the weight of his disappointment, and I don't feel guilty anymore. He wanted to prove I was still desirable. He thought it would be a quick fix, a little ego boost that would make me quiet and compliant again. He thought he could control the outcome. But he didn't realize that you can't show someone a world of warmth and light and then expect them to willingly walk back into the cold. He started the fire, and now he's angry that our house is burning down. Maybe it needed to. Maybe sometimes you have to burn everything to the ground to see the sky again.
Story 9.
I need you to understand my side of this. Everyone is calling me a monster, a kidnapper, but they don't know what I've been through. They haven't lived my life. Before you judge me, you have to know the whole story, not just the lies my sister is telling everyone. My husband and I have been trying for a big family since we got married. I have a beautiful daughter, Amelia, who is 4 now. She is my entire world, my miracle. But she was supposed to be a big sister. Many, many times. I've been pregnant 18 times in my life. 16 of those babies are gone. 14 of them I never even got to hold. They were just gone. A phantom limb I'll feel for the rest of my life. But 2 of them, 2 little boys I held my son Michael for 6 hours before his lungs gave out. I held my son David for 2 days. I watched them take their first and last breaths. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? My body is a wasteland of broken promises. My home is so quiet it screams. Every time I look at Amelia playing by herself, my heart physically breaks for the brothers and sisters she'll never know. Then last year, a miracle happened. My little sister Sarah called me. She's only 21, still a kid herself, and has always been loud about how she never wanted children. She's all about her art school and her weird friends. So when she told me she was pregnant, I was shocked. And then she said the words that changed everything. It's twins. It was like the clouds parted and a beam of light hit me. It was so clear. This was it. This was the universe or God or whatever finally making things right. It wasn't an accident. It was a solution. She had two. One for her, one for me. It was perfect. She was never meant to be a mother to two babies, not when I was suffering so much. She was chosen to be the vessel to carry my child to me. My mom saw it right away, too. She called me the second she got off the phone with Sarah and said, "This is our answer. This is how we heal our family." We decided to talk to her together. We took her out to a nice cafe and gently explained the situation. Mom did most of the talking. She told Sarah what a beautiful gift this was, how she could finally do something selfless and meaningful with her life by fixing our broken family. We weren't asking for both, of course. Just one. It was only fair. She could have one and I could have the one I was owed. Sarah just stared at us. I'll never forget the look on her face. It was pure disgust. "Are you out of your minds?" she said. "Hell no, they're my babies." Her words felt like a physical slap. How could she be so selfish, so blind? This wasn't about her. This was about a cosmic wrong being made right. We tried to reason with her, but she just got colder and angrier. She accused us of being insane. I started crying, begging her to understand the years of pain I'd lived through, but she wouldn't listen. I thought she just needed time. I sent her text explaining how much this meant to me, how she was a hero for doing this. She ignored every single one. The last time I saw her before she cut me off, I took her to lunch. She was about 23 weeks along. I tried to talk about our plans, about how we would coordinate things, how my baby would know her cousin. I wanted to talk about names. I had the perfect name picked out, a family name. She just stood up, threw her napkin on the table, and walked out without a word. She left me sitting there alone. After that, she blocked my number. She blocked Mom. It was cruel, but I knew she was just scared. She was young, hormonal, and overwhelmed. She'd come around. I couldn't let her fear stop me from preparing for my daughter. I had to get ready. So I started on the nursery. I painted it a soft yellow and filled it with beautiful furniture. I bought a crib, a changing table, tiny little dresses and blankets. Every time I folded a onesie, I felt a piece of my heart stitch itself back together. This was real. This was happening. I told all our friends and family the wonderful news. I explained that Sarah was being my surrogate, carrying my baby for me as a gift. Everyone was so happy for us. They said it was the most beautiful story of sisterly love they'd ever heard. The support was overwhelming. When the twins were born, they were very early and had to be in the NICU. Sarah didn't tell me, but another family member did. They sent me pictures. 2 tiny little girls hooked up to so many wires. My heart broke for them, but it swelled with love for the one that was mine. I posted a picture of her on my Facebook. I wrote, "Meet Elizabeth May." She came into the world a little early, but she's a fighter, just like her mommy. We can't wait to bring you home. Everyone loved it. Hundreds of likes, comments full of congratulations. I was finally getting my happy ending. For months I updated everyone on Elizabeth's progress in the NICU using the photos I was getting from my aunt. I was building a world for her, a welcome party waiting for her to come home. Now they're finally strong enough to be discharged soon. My whole life is about to begin. I was just sitting in Elizabeth's nursery this morning, rocking in the chair and imagining holding her when my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. My heart stopped when I read the preview on my lock screen. It was from Sarah. The message was blunt. Cruel. Take down every single picture of my daughters right now. Stop telling people Elizabeth is yours. You are sick and you need help. If you ever come near me or my babies, I will call the police. I read it 10 times, the words blurring through my tears. My own sister. How could she be so hateful? After everything I had done to prepare a loving home for her child, times my times, child. This is the thanks I get. She was the one who was sick. Sick with selfishness. My husband, Mark, came into the room. He saw the look on my face, and his own face fell. He's a good man, but he doesn't understand the depths of my pain. He never will. What's wrong? He asked, already looking tired. I showed him the phone. He read it and sighed, rubbing his forehead. Okay, honey. Maybe you should just take the post down for a little while. Just until she calms down. She needs to calm down, I shrieked. She's trying to steal my baby Mark. After I've already announced her to the world, what am I supposed to tell people, that it was all a joke? Before he could answer, there was a loud, angry knock at the front door. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew who it was. I just knew it. Mark opened the door, and there she was. Sarah, my little sister, with a face like thunder. She didn't even look at Mark. Her eyes were locked on me. You have 5 minutes to take down every lie you've posted online, she said, her voice shaking with rage. Then you are going to post an apology explaining that you are mentally unwell and that you lied. I will do no such thing, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Elizabeth is my daughter. You were just the carrier. Sarah let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She pushed past Mark and stormed into my house. Where is it? She demanded, looking around wildly. Where's the crazy shrine you built? And then she saw it. The hallway that leads to the spare rooms. The door to the nursery was slightly ajar. She walked towards it like she was in a trance. I didn't try to stop her. I wanted her to see it. I wanted her to see how much I loved this baby, how real this was. She pushed the door open and just stood there, staring at the soft yellow walls, the white crib with the mobile of little lambs spinning gently above it, the changing table with diapers neatly stacked, the bookshelf filled with stories I couldn't wait to read to her. She turned around slowly, her eyes wide, with a horror that I couldn't understand. You are out of your mind, she whispered. It was quiet, but it hit me harder than if she'd screamed. You're a monster. I'm a mother, I cried, the tears finally breaking free. I'm the mother who has buried 2 children. I'm the mother who has lost 16 babies. The universe owes me this child. You have 2. You can spare 1. It's not that hard to understand. They are not objects you can trade, she screamed, her voice finally cracking. They are human beings, and they are both mine. My body carried them. I went through hell to bring them into this world. They are my daughters Clara and Rose, not Elizabeth. My mom showed up then. I'd called her as soon as Sarah started banging on the door. She rushed in and immediately put her arms around me. "Sarah, stop this," Mom said, glaring at her. "You are ripping this family apart. Look what you're doing to your sister." "Look what times I'm doing," Sarah asked, gesturing around the nursery. "She is delusional, and you are encouraging her. Both of you need professional help." She pulled out her phone. "I'm not kidding. I have a lawyer, and I'm getting a restraining order. You will never see my children. Ever." That's when I snapped. The thought of another child being taken from me, of this one perfect, beautiful gift being snatched away, I couldn't bear it. I lunged for her phone, for anything. I just wanted to make her stop. Mark grabbed me from behind, holding my arms. I was sobbing, screaming at her that she was a thief, a baby snatcher, that she was ruining my life. She just looked at me with cold, dead eyes. There was no love there. No sisterly connection, just disgust. She turned and walked out of the house, out of my life, taking my daughter's future with her. The aftermath was a storm. Sarah did exactly what she said she would. She took screenshots of all my Facebook posts, the pictures of Elizabeth, my heartfelt updates, all the congratulations from our friends and family, and she sent them out in a mass message to everyone we knew. She wrote a long explanation, painting me as a crazy, obsessed kidnapper who was stalking her and her newborns. My phone started blowing up. First came the confused messages. "What is Sarah talking about? Is this a joke?" Then, as the reality of her story set in, the tone changed. The support I had felt for months evaporated in a single afternoon. People who had called me strong and deserving were now calling me unhinged. They accused me of lying, of manipulating them. They took her side. Every single one of them. My beautiful story was torn to shreds. The world I had carefully built for my daughter was a pile of rubble. Mark tried to talk to me, begging me to get help, to see a doctor. He said he was worried I was a danger to myself. I saw it for what it was. He was taking her side too. He didn't believe me either. A week later, the papers came, a temporary restraining order. I was legally forbidden from contacting my sister or coming within 500 feet of her or her children. Her children. Not my child. A piece of paper trying to erase a mother's bond. Mark took down the nursery while I was out. He said it was for the best. When I came home and saw the empty room, a blank yellow box, I felt that old, familiar hollowness. It was the 17th coffin I'd have to carry in my heart. They all think I'm the crazy one. They think this is over. But they don't understand. Sarah wasn't just my sister. She was a vessel. A means to an end. She delivered my baby, and then, in the cruelest twist of all, she stole her. She let me be a mother for a few beautiful months, only to rip it all away. She's the monster, not me. And she can have her lawyers and her restraining orders, but it changes nothing. That little girl is my daughter. She was meant for me. A mother always finds her way back to her child. and I will find my way back to Elizabeth.
Story Teen.
I'm sure you've heard my ex-husband's side of the story. He's very good at telling stories. He can make himself the hero of any situation, the calm, logical man betrayed by the hysterical, cheating wife. I know what I did was wrong. I will never say it wasn't. But a marriage doesn't just break. It gets worn down bit by bit until there's nothing left but a list of chores and two strangers sharing a mortgage. Our life wasn't bad. That was the problem. It was just empty. Tom was a great provider. He's a wonderful father, and he never missed a parent-teacher conference or a soccer game. But he stopped being my partner. He became my co-manager in the business of running our family. Our conversations were about logistics, who was picking up which kid, what needed to be fixed in the house, the plan for the weekend barbecue with his parents. I was the chief operating officer of our household. I managed the schedules, the meals, the social calendar. It was a full-time job on top of my actual full-time job, and I was good at it. But somewhere in all that managing, I disappeared. I wasn't a woman he wanted anymore. I was a system that was running smoothly. I tried to tell him. I can't count the number of times I sat on the edge of our bed after the kids were asleep and the house was finally quiet and said, "I feel so lonely," or "I miss us. I miss when we used to talk about things other than bills." He would look up from his laptop confused, like I just introduced a variable he hadn't accounted for. His solution wasn't to hold me or talk to me or plan a surprise date. His solution was to research. He went on Amazon and ordered books. Books with titles like Times, the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work Times, and Times Mating in Captivity, **. He left them on my nightstand as if our lack of intimacy was a leaky faucet that could be fixed with the right instruction manual. He'd read a chapter and then try to schedule sex like it was an agenda item. It was clinical. It was his way of trying to fix me to solve the problem of his unhappy wife. He never seemed to understand that I didn't want a project manager. I wanted a husband who actually saw times me. And then there was Mark, my boss. It didn't start as anything scandalous. Mark saw me. At work, I wasn't just a mom or a wife. I was a professional with ideas and ambition. He'd ask my opinion on a big project and actually listen to the answer. Our lunches were filled with talk about the industry, about our frustrations, about our goals. He saw my mind first. He admired my work ethic. For the first time in years, I felt like a whole person, not just a collection of roles I was supposed to play. The friendship became the one place I could breathe. It was the one place I felt visible. And the loneliness at home was like a huge dark pit. Mark's attention was a light. I knew I was getting too close to the edge, but I was so desperate for warmth. The affair wasn't a plan. It was a collapse. One night, after a brutal week at home and a huge success at work, we were the last two in the office celebrating a deal we'd closed. The conversation turned personal. I told him how invisible I felt. He told me he thought I was the most powerful, brilliant woman he'd ever met. And I just broke. It was a line I swore I would never, ever cross. But I did. For 2 years, I lived 2 lives. There was my home life, where I was mom and household manager, making sure everything ran perfectly so no one would look too closely. And then there was my other life, a secret stolen world where I was a desired, intelligent woman. The lies were awful. They were a constant weight in my stomach. I wasn't trying to destroy my family. I swear I was just trying to survive the crushing emptiness of my life. I thought if I could just have this one thing for myself, this one place where I felt alive, I could keep everything else together. Tom must have sensed something was off, but his approach was exactly what I expected. He didn't try to get closer to me. He became a detective. He started making comments about how much I was on my phone. He'd ask who I was, texting his voice casual but his eyes sharp. Once he tried to grab my phone, laughing it off as a joke, but his fingers were tight. It felt like such a violation. He hadn't looked at times, really looked into my eyes to see how I was feeling in years. But he was more than willing to look through my private messages. He wasn't looking for his wife. He was looking for a problem to solve, a betrayal to confirm, so he could finally have an enemy to fight, instead of a marriage to fix. I became more careful. I deleted messages. I kept my phone with me at all times. The stress was eating me alive, but I couldn't stop. I was in too deep. The weekends were the hardest. I'd paint on a smile for family outings, feeling like a complete fraud while Tom watched me with that cold, calculating look in his eyes. He stopped buying books and started watching me. Then last week I got careless. I had a second phone, a cheap one, mostly for work, but it's where Mark and I talked the most. It was an old one, and the battery life was terrible. I came home late from the office, exhausted, and plugged it in to charge in the kitchen, completely forgetting about it. I went upstairs, took a shower, and got ready for bed, my mind a million miles away. When I came back down for a glass of water, the kitchen was dark, except for the light from the hallway. Tom was standing there by the counter, perfectly still. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking down at something in his hand. It was the phone, its screen lit up. He held it like it was evidence. He didn't say a word, but in that awful, deafening silence I knew my two worlds were about to collide. How long? His voice was flat. Not angry, not hurt. Just empty. It was so much worse than yelling. I couldn't speak. My throat closed up. All the lies I had practiced, all the excuses I had ready, they all just evaporated. He was holding my whole secret life in his hand. I recovered the texts, Sarah. All of them. From months ago. I just needed to be sure. He set the phone down on the counter with a quiet click. 2 years. You've been lying to me for 2 years. I finally found my voice, but it was just a whisper. Tom, I can explain. Can you? He asked, still not looking at me. He just stared at the phone. Can you explain it in a way that makes sense, because I've been trying? For weeks. I thought maybe I was going crazy. But it turns out the logical explanation was the right one. He was treating it like an equation he'd finally solved. There was no emotion, just the cold satisfaction of being right. All I wanted was for him to scream at me, to cry, to throw something. Anything but this. This terrifying calm. He walked past me and went upstairs without another word. I heard our bedroom door click shut. I stood alone in the dark kitchen for what felt like hours, shaking. The next few days were a living hell. He was a ghost in our house. He spoke to the kids normally, but he looked right through me. He slept in the guest room. I tried to talk to him, to apologize, to beg. He'd just shake his head and say, "We'll talk when I'm ready." But he wasn't getting ready to talk. He was getting ready for war. I found out later he'd been talking to someone else the whole time, Mark's wife Laura. They were comparing notes, building a case. My desperate attempts to connect were just noise to him while he was busy plotting my execution. The following weekend, I was supposed to meet Mark at a hotel downtown. It wasn't what it sounds like. It wasn't a romantic getaway. It was a meeting to end things. I was sick with guilt and fear, and I knew I had to break it off. I had to try to save my family. I walked into the lobby, my heart pounding, looking for Mark. Instead, I saw Tom. He was standing by the check-in desk, and he wasn't alone. Next to him was a man in a sheriff's uniform. For a second, my brain just stopped working. I couldn't process it. Tom looked at me, and his face was made of stone. He nodded at the sheriff, who took a step forward. "Are you Sarah?" the officer asked. I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. He handed me a thick envelope. I just stared at it. It didn't feel real. People were watching. The receptionist, a couple waiting for the elevator. My private personal hell was being staged for an audience. "Tom, please," I choked out tears, instantly blurring my vision. "What is this? Can we please just go home and talk?" "There's nothing to talk about," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I think this is pretty clear. He didn't just want to divorce me. He wanted to humiliate me. He wanted to break me in the most public way possible. That cold, calculating man who researched our marriage problems in books had researched the perfect way to destroy me, too. My affair was wrong, a terrible mistake born of loneliness. His revenge was cruel, a deliberate act designed to inflict the maximum amount of pain. In that moment, the man I had loved for 15 years became a stranger. A monster. The aftermath was a blur. I drove home, I don't even remember how, and collapsed. The next day, I resigned from my job. I couldn't face Mark, I couldn't face my colleagues. My entire world had been demolished. The first thing I did was find a therapist. I poured everything out, the loneliness, the affair, the public humiliation. She helped me see my own failings without letting me drown in shame. I was broken, but I wanted to get better. I begged Tom to come with me. "Please," I told him over the phone, my voice raw from crying. "Let's just try. For us, for the kids." I even bought a new copy of that stupid Times Mating in Captivity Times book he'd once left on my nightstand. A pathetic, desperate peace offering. "No" was all he said. "It's too late for that." Of course it was. He didn't want to fix anything. He had already won. The divorce went through quickly. He was organized, efficient. It was like closing a business deal. I moved into a small, sterile apartment that smelled like new paint. The silence was the worst part. For years, I had craved a moment to myself, and now I was drowning in it. About a month after I moved out, a friend called. She was hesitant. "I don't know if I should be telling you this," she started, "but I saw Tom today. At the farmer's market." "Okay," I said, my stomach twisting. He wasn't alone. He was with a woman. And the kids? They looked like a family. I knew before she even said the name. It was Laura, Mark's wife, the woman he'd been collaborating with. It all clicked into place. Their late-night phone calls, their shared strategy, it wasn't just about getting revenge on their cheating spouses. It was an audition. He wasn't just tearing our family apart. He was building a new one from the wreckage with the only other person who could make him feel like the righteous betrayed victim. He didn't just move on. He moved into a life that was a mirror image of the one we'd had, just with a different wife. A better one in his eyes. One who was a victim just like him. He tells everyone he's finally happy that he escaped a toxic marriage and found someone who truly appreciates him. But I know the truth. This was never about his happiness. It was about winning. He couldn't fix our marriage, so he demolished it. He couldn't stand feeling like a failure, so he made sure I was the villain. And he stands there now, the hero of the story he so carefully wrote, built on the ashes of our family.
Story 11.
My husband, the man you might know as Mayo 40, probably thinks I'm the worst person in the world right now. He probably thinks our whole life has been a lie. And maybe from his side of the fence it looks that way. But the secret I kept wasn't about him, it was about me. I love my husband. I need to say that first. For 18 years he has been my rock. He's a good, kind, steady man. He's the father of my children. Our life has been comfortable, safe, but somewhere along the way, between the PTA meetings, the mortgages, and the Saturday trips to Home Depot, I vanished. The woman I used to be, the one who was a little wild and felt good in her own skin, just faded away. I became a wife. I became a mom. I became a partner in this quiet, predictable life we built. And I was so lonely for the person I'd lost. Mayo is content with quiet comfort. He describes himself as a slightly prude person, and that's the perfect way to put it. It's not like he's controlling or tells me what to wear. He'd never do that. It's more subtle. It's an atmosphere. It's the way our life together has a certain temperature, and it's always been set to modest. My more daring side, the playful part of me, just felt wrong in our world. It felt like wearing a bright red dress to a funeral. So I packed it away. I stopped going braless around the house. I never bought a thong bikini for our family vacations, even though I wanted to. It wasn't because he laid down a rule. It was just the air we breathed. Our life was a beige room, and I was starting to feel beige too. I started to feel invisible, not to him, but to myself. I'd look in the mirror and see a 8-year-old mom who managed carpool schedules and meal plans, and I couldn't remember the last time I felt genuinely, thrillingly alive. The whole thing started on a girls' trip 3 years ago. We were in Mexico drinking margaritas by the pool. I was wearing a new bikini, one that was a little cheekier than anything I'd wear at home. I felt amazing. The sun was on my skin. I was laughing with my friends, and for the first time in forever, I wasn't just mom. My friend took a picture of me laughing, looking over my shoulder. It was a great photo. I looked happy. I looked confident. On the flight home, I did something crazy. I created a new Instagram account. A blank slate. I posted that one photo with some silly caption about sunshine and didn't think much of it. It was just a little digital secret, a place to put a picture that didn't fit on my main account, full of family photos and pictures of our dog. But then something happened. People liked it. Strangers, people from all over left comments. They said I was beautiful, that I looked vibrant. It was like a drug. It wasn't about the validation from men, not really. It was about seeing myself through a new lens. These people didn't see a suburban mom. They saw a woman. And I realized how much I had missed her. That one picture turned into another and another. It became my hobby, my art project. It was my space to be the version of myself that didn't fit into our quiet life. I'd post photos from the gym showing off the hard work I was putting in. I'd take artistic shots on solo hikes. And yes, I posted photos in bikinis, in lingerie, and sometimes topless with my hands or my hair covering myself. It was empowering. Over 3 years, it grew into something huge. Over 2,000 posts and a following of over 250,000 people. I blocked Mayo from the very beginning. I blocked his sister, his mom, all of his family. It sounds terrible, I know. It sounds like I was trying to deceive him, but in my heart I was trying to protect what I was building. I was protecting this fragile new confidence from the one person I knew wouldn't get it. He would see it as a betrayal, not a rebirth. He would see it as disrespectful to him and our family. He would ask me to stop, and because I love him, I probably would have. I would have had to extinguish that little spark of myself all over again, and I just couldn't bear to do that. My daughters, they're teenagers, found it eventually. Of course they did. They're smart. One day my oldest came to me, phone in her hand, with a nervous look on her face. We sat down and we talked. I was honest. I told her it was my space, my creative outlet. It was a way for Mom to feel good about herself, to feel strong and confident in a way she hadn't for a long time. And you know what? She got it. Both of them did. They understood it was for me. Some of my friends and even a few coworkers knew. It wasn't some dark, shameful secret I hid from the whole world. It was just one I hid from him. It was never about choosing those 250,000 strangers over my husband. It was about choosing to not let a part of myself die. I lived 2 lives. In public with him on our trips, I was the conservative wife he was comfortable with. But online and inside myself, I was finally becoming whole again. For 3 years I managed it. I kept the world separate. It was exhausting sometimes, but it was worth it. I was a better mom, a happier person. I thought I could keep it going. I thought my little protected space was safe. Then last night my phone buzzed. We were watching a movie, Mayo, and I curled up on the couch like we've done 1,000 times. The house was quiet. I glanced at my screen. It was an Instagram notification, but not on my secret account. It was a message request on my personal mom account. My heart stopped. She never DMs me. I opened it and my blood ran cold. It was a screenshot of one of my posts. One of the riskier ones, a topless shot on a beach taken from behind. Underneath it, there was just one sentence from her. "What the hell is this, and does my brother know?" I just stared at the screen at the picture of my own back at her words, burning a hole in my phone. My heart was a hammer against my ribs. Mayo was right next to me on the couch, completely oblivious, laughing at something in the movie. The sound felt 1,000,000 miles away. For a second, I thought about frantically deleting everything, the account, the pictures, the evidence, as if I could erase 3 years of my life with a few taps. But it was too late. She had the proof. She was holding the grenade, and I knew she was going to pull the pin. "Everything okay?" Mayo asked, his eyes still on the TV. "Yeah, fine," I managed to choke out. "Just a friend, you know." Drama. The lie felt disgusting in my mouth. I stood up, my legs shaky, and mumbled something about needing some water. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, my breath coming in ragged little gasps. I didn't reply to his sister. There was nothing to say. The war had already been declared, and I hadn't even known I was a soldier. I slept maybe an hour that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that screenshot. The next morning was hell. I was waiting, just waiting for the explosion. Every time he picked up his phone, my stomach clenched. But he just went about his morning routine, making coffee, reading the news. The silence was deafening. He went to work, and I spent the day in a fog of pure dread. It happened when he came home. He walked in, put his keys on the hook, and didn't kiss me hello. He just stood in the doorway of the kitchen where I was pretending to cook dinner. His face was pale. Not angry, not yet. Just blank. It was a look of profound, devastating confusion. He held up his phone, his hand trembling slightly. "My sister sent me this," he said. His voice was quiet, hollowed out. "I don't understand." On the screen was my account, my profile picture, my grid of over 2,000 photos. The whole secret world I had built for myself was right there in his hand. I opened my mouth to say all the things I had rehearsed. About feeling invisible, about needing a space for myself, about how it wasn't about him. But the words just crumbled. Seeing his face, the raw hurt in his eyes made all my justifications feel like selfish excuses. "It's my page?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. He started scrolling. Slowly, methodically. He saw pictures from my girls' trips that I'd never shown him. He saw me in lingerie in our own bedroom, in photos I'd taken when he was out of the house. He saw me topless on a beach, my hair covering my chest, a picture taken by a friend. He saw a woman he didn't know, living a life he had no part in. 250,000 people, he said, looking up from the phone. The blankness was gone. Now there was just pain. 250,000 strangers got to see you like this. Your friends knew. Your coworkers knew. He paused, and his next words broke me. The girls knew, didn't they? I just nodded, unable to speak. The look on his face, it was like I had taken his trust and shattered it on the floor. It wasn't about the photos anymore. It was about the conspiracy of it all. Everyone was in on the secret. But him. "You blocked me?" he said, his voice cracking. "You blocked me? Why? If this was so innocent, so empowering, why would you hide it from me?" "Because I knew you wouldn't understand." The words burst out of me, desperate and raw. "Because you're a prude, Mayo. You said it yourself. I knew you'd see it as dirty or shameful, and you'd ask me to stop. I couldn't go back to feeling like nothing. It was for me. It was never ever against you." He just shook his head, scrolling again. "This isn't you." "It times me," I cried. "It's the part of me I thought I'd lost. The part that felt buried under laundry and school runs and 18 years of being sensible." He didn't hear me. He just saw the betrayal. He saw the photos, the comments from strange men, and the fact that his wife had hidden a huge part of her life from him for 3 years. He walked out of the kitchen without another word, went upstairs and closed the bedroom door. That was a week ago. Since then, we've been living like polite ghosts in our own home. He sleeps in the guest room. He says good morning when he comes down for coffee. He asks if I need anything from the store. He's forcing a smile that never reaches his eyes. It's 1,000 times worse than screaming. The house is filled with everything we haven't said. I know he's been talking to his family. I overheard him on the phone with his sister yesterday. I heard fragments. I don't even know who she is anymore. The whole thing is a farce. They're having some kind of family chat conference about me, about my account, about my choices. I'm not a person to them anymore. I'm a problem. A case study in betrayal, a farce. That word sticks in my gut like a knife. He thinks my secret life was a judgment on him. He thinks it means I found him boring, that our life wasn't enough, that I was seeking attention from other men because he didn't give me enough. He thinks he's less important than 250000 strangers. But he's got it all backwards. The terrible, stupid irony is that I kept it all secret because I love him so much. I did it to protect him from a part of me I thought he couldn't handle. I didn't want to see the disappointment and confusion on his face. I didn't want him to feel hurt or disrespected. I was trying to have both my comfortable, loving life with him and this vibrant, colorful inner life for myself. I thought I could keep them in separate boxes. Now the boxes have smashed together and everything is a wreck. The very look I was terrified of seeing on his face is now the only way he looks at me. I didn't want to lose him, but I couldn't stand to lose myself either. And now, sitting here in this cold, quiet house with a stranger who has my husband's face, I'm terrified. I've already lost both.